Brene Brown uses a quote that rather than try to be right, it's better to try and get it right. And her quote is actually pretty profound when you think about it. And we've had the conversation many times about those individuals with the need to be right. What do you call them?
I call them the right fighters.
Right, the right fighters.
You gotta fight to be right.
And it's really, there's a lot of people that have that quality where they just need to be right. And if you're one of those people, maybe you want to listen closely to this particular episode. And so I think it is really foundational for our personal growth to be aware of, are we being a right fighter? Because
Wait, slow down, cowboy. Let's not step over that. I just had a brainwave.
Okay.
You think about being a right fighter. It means that you're demanding not just for yourself to be heard, but for other people to agree with the fact that you're right.
Of course.
And I think that's where the disconnect comes. And of course, as we've seen over the last 3.5, 4 years, is that need to be right is what creates a lot of this polarity. And
huge.
Right. So the right fighting also shuts down your ability to hear, not just listen, but to hear an opposing opinion or something else that could actually matter to you. So the question I always ask myself when I'm thinking about, am I being a right fighter, or am I so committed to what I believe is right? And I've disciplined myself to ask myself, but what if I'm wrong? But what if I'm wrong? Anyway, let's carry on. I just didn't want to step over that.
But with that question of what if I'm wrong, but that's the willingness to consider that you may not be right. And right fighters generally don't do that. So this conversation, or part of this conversation,
they can't, because it would their brains would blow up. It would destroy their commitment to needing to be right. I've watched relationships be destroyed because somebody
100%.
can't be wrong.
Yeah. So it's a good foundation for this conversation, because actually to begin a journey or continue on a journey of some kind of self-improvement or personal growth, we, in this conversation, to your point, have to let go of our attachment to have those really strong, rigid beliefs. And we have to be open to the possibility and have consideration of changing those, and that that we might be wrong. So let's kick it off. This is back to what the original idea was, is 5 keys, and so first and foremost, we have to recognize, and again, we've had these conversations many times. So I kind of like the way that this is coming to fruition in terms of a conversation. The one story is, your life is a story. So your life is just a story. We all have lived our life through the narrative that we've constructed in our minds, and that's what it is. It is our story. It shapes our identity, and it actually influences how we perceive the world. Stephen Covey, he stated once, and this is so good: we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. And that leads into my favorite quote, which is by Wayne Dyer, which says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So the point is that our own self-image and the beliefs that frame our narrative for our story, we have to stop and acknowledge that it is neither perfect or entirely accurate, and it's probably just not the truth, because we're looking at it through a different set of filters. So in other words, who we are today and how we see the world today filters the story from the past, and we're looking at the world through a different lens. So I know that was saying a lot. Do you want to jump in here?
Well, briefly, just in the fact that our story is actually not real. Our memories are designed for self-preservation. So when we're looking back at our story, we're usually the hero or maybe the victim, rarely the villain in our own stories. But if we think about our stories, and the line I use with my clients is, you are not your story. Your story has got you here. But if you redefine and recontextualize how you look at your story, what if you go from being a victim to being the hero in your own story? Or unfortunately, many people demand the fact that they become the hero regardless of who they hurt, what they've done, the destruction along the way, but they have to be the hero. So a story always, in a story arc, one of my favorite people and one of my clients for a long time, Margaret, has always said there's a story arc. where we get to the point where we fall in love with the hero and we, are all against and vilify the victim, or the villain, sorry. And what happens is that there's going to be a place where we have to find our way and define ourselves through our story. And if we're
Mhm.
always looking back and trying to define ourselves through our story, through our his story or our her story, then we really get stuck in how do we recreate or manifest our future and our what's next, because our history, is truly just the past. And as my Italian friend says, the pasta is the pasta.
That's so bad. Okay,
I
so I
know.
really like that his story, history, his story,
Okay.
and it is just a story. And we sometimes hold it as an absolute truth. And I've shared in the past that my dad and I had a pretty rocky relationship, as you know. And I sometimes blame my dad, and have in the past blamed my dad for a lot of things. But one time, and as you recall, I went to three sisters, and I went to each of those sisters, and I kind of poked and delved and kind of unpacked and had conversations about dad. Their story about dad was so different than the story I was telling myself. Like, I saying, 180 degrees from where I was at. So that was my first realization of, holy cow, I've got this whole story. Now, my experience was my experience. And, since then, of course, I look at all the gifts my dad gave me, regardless of how he showed up in my life as, the only boy or the only man in the family. But that's not really what this is about. The point is that it was a story I was telling myself. And as I've changed that story, I have a lot more empathy and compassion for my dad. And, that's just the way that went. It was just a story. So
And
that's
ultimately, empathy and compassion for yourself, because
there. Mhm.
me and Aaron and the kids and the grandkids and our chosen family and Michael and everybody that are benefiting from your Fredisms, from the fact that
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
learn so many things. I'm
True.
benefiting from it.
Yeah. That's very true. There's no doubt about it.